Every town has its own creepy haunted house. Maybe it's a dilapidated Victorian, or a crumbling ranch-style house. There's always a story that goes with it. Murder, suicides, witches, demons summoning gonorrhea. Whatever the case, there's always a story to go with the creepiness. I had the misfortune of living in one such house for about 8 or 9 months back in the late 80s. Looking back, I don't know what my parents were even thinking moving into the place, other than we were poor and the rent was cheap. We didn't know the stories yet, but we found it all out eventually. My apologies if this is a little rambling or doesn't have a satisfactory standard story format. We never really got a resolution to this mess. We just got the hell out of there. The house still stands, as of a few weeks ago. On a trip home to visit the folks, we drove by it, and I can tell you it still makes me shiver. It would take a lot of money or some sort of dire situation to induce me to even step foot in that hellhole again, especially now that I am a medium and I can actually see the dead. I don't want to see what lingers there. Honestly, driving by it is what brought these memories back to the forefront of my mind. We moved in around March or April, leaving the house in the country with 7 acres of woods to play in, and taking up residence in the somewhat cramped house in what our small, podunk town considered a neighbourhood. We had next door neighbours to one side of us, and a patch of woods to the other and behind. We never really played in those woods very much, which, looking back now, is pretty odd. My brother, 3 years and 5 days my senior, had been dragging me through the woods for 4 years by that point. I was fairly used to tree climbing and dirt, but something about those woods just felt wrong to both of us. We only went up the large hill area behind the house, once berry picking with our mum, but otherwise, we only ever went in the woods as a shortcut to visit friends. Honestly, the entire house felt wrong, although initially I don't think any of us picked up on it consciously. I was 8, and 4 of the years of my short life had been spent as a Navy brat. I was used to moving around. I was more focused on what my room was, and if the kids in my new school would be dicks or not. I was picked on a lot, so this was a fair concern. My brother was edging into puberty at this point, so I think he was just thrilled to be closer to town and that he got the back bedroom. My parents had jobs and bills to worry about. The house was laid out somewhat weird. Upon entering the front door, you'd be in the living room, which opened up with a large archway into the dining room and kitchen beyond. Stepping into the dining room, you could go right into the hallway. That hallway had my parents' room on the right. The bathroom, which was a huge cavernous nightmare, more on that later, was directly in front of the entrance to the hallway. Further down the hall was a closet, and at the very end, and without a door, was my bedroom. Off the kitchen was a small utility room, and my brother's small but far more private bedroom was off that utility room. It wasn't anything fancy. Ugly brown shag carpet, cracked linoleum, fake wood panel walls, and for some reason, the hallway and my bedroom had the most horrible pattern carpets imaginable. Picture something from Stanley Kubrick's version of the Overlook Hotel in The Shining, and that will give you an idea. I think I may have even used the patterns to mark out areas for my dolls, cars, and various other toys like Little Danny Torrance too. When you're a kid, you don't notice the shabbiness too much, and I'm sure my parents were just grateful it was cheap. We would find out why soon enough. There were a few different incidents that happened during our tenure there. The first was something that started in this house and haunted me for most of my life. As a smaller kid, I had the occasional bad dreams, which is quite normal. We process anxiety and stress through our dreams, so having nightmares is common to pretty much everyone. Sleep paralysis, on the other hand, happens far less frequently, at least an awareness of it. Although there is also a reasonable explanation for how it works as well. Essentially, our bodies create this chemical and release it when we sleep that paralyses us, in order to prevent us from acting out our dreams. When you wake up in this state, it can be, well, terrifying, even for an adult. So for an 8-year-old with a vivid imagination, yeah, I'm proud of not peeing my pants the first time it happened. What the basic literature about sleep paralysis doesn't explain is how it feels. You ever have a tooth pulled and get your jaw numbed for it? You know that weird, dead feeling? Imagine that being your entire body. A lot of people experience visual and auditory hallucinations while in this state as well. This is where night hag syndrome, sleep demons, and other myths originates. Your mind is half asleep, and your body is essentially, well, I imagine this is what being aware of being dead would be like. Later, I would research and understand what was going on, but at the time, I was firmly convinced I was being attacked by something. Something I couldn't see, or feel, or even smell was holding me down, and I couldn't breathe. It literally felt like I was being pressed down into the bed and suffocated. And all by a being I couldn't see. My eyes would be open. I could see the ugly walls, the door of my closet, and the dingy yellow light my parents left on in the hallway in the hopes that I wouldn't scream awake. What I couldn't see was anything sitting on me, pinning me down. I felt it, but couldn't see it. There was also a low sort of static, electric humming sound that I could also somehow feel. This was also accompanied by absolute terror. I don't mind a spider, scary, or horror movie fear. I mean a true sense of impending doom and demise. So what does that have to do with a haunted house? Well, I'd never had a single episode before I lived there. They started within maybe a month of my arrival, and I had them most nightly during my time there. While I've had episodes since, we're talking about 32 years or so of them now, but none of them has been as horrible. My mum always came running when I was finally able to break away and scream. She always assured me it was just a bad dream. She eventually apologised for that. She recognised the same belief I had long held. Something in that house started attacking me. Something was working against me, feeding off me even. Paranoid, maybe. But wait, there's more. Both of my parents worked and we lived in a relatively safe podunk town in the middle of nowhere in the 80s. The time of the latchkey kids. My brother's was also 11, and so at this point, which made him old enough to take care of me. So during the summer days, we were left to our own devices. Sometimes we walked to the local public pool, or to town, or to shop, or to visit my mum at work. Most of the time, we just puttered around the house playing games or watching cartoons. He was a bossy tool, like most older siblings, but we usually got along okay, even if he cheated at every game we played. While he did take pleasure in tormenting me and teasing me as often as possible, I rarely ever saw him actually scared, so when I did, I paid attention. One blistering hot afternoon, we were sitting in front of the box fan in his room playing cards, or some such nonsense. I remember having my back to the doorway and cards in my hand. My brother suddenly jumped up and ran from the room like his ass was on fire, and I, like the dutiful little sibling, trailed behind with a crazy look on my face. He raced around the corner through the kitchen and dining room towards the front door. We didn't have central AC, not even a wall shaker, and again we lived in a fairly crime-free place, so our front door was wide open. Only the screen door was closed to keep out the bugs and the critters. My brother stopped in front of the door, scratching his head in confusion. "What?" I asked, obviously even more baffled than him. "Nothing, I thought I heard Mum telling me to come down and open the door," he responded, still looking confused. I returned the confused look, which earned me a shrug. He turned and went back towards the bedroom, with me scurrying behind to keep him from peeking at my cards. We resumed our game and conversation, although he was a little more tense now than he'd been before. I assumed he was just trying to mess with me. Older siblings are dicks about that stuff, and shrugged it off as we went back to our game. Another 4 or 5 minutes of playing, and the same process repeated. He jumped up and bolted for the front door. This time, not only was his butt on fire, but there were hounds of hell too, or so it seemed. I followed at top speed, skidding to a stop as he stood glaring at the front door, as if being open was an affront to God. "What?" I asked again, still mostly convinced he was messing with me. "It was Dad," he responded in some sort of halting way. He was pissed off. I heard him yelling at me first middle name, last name, "Open this front door now." Obviously, he looked shook. And not just at the idea of our dad yelling. Mum was a softie, but our dad was the disciplinarian, but even the threat of a butt whooping wouldn't have accompanied the level of terror that was on my brother's face. We spent the rest of the afternoon outside, both of us too nervous to stay inside. We didn't really talk about this after, at least not for a while. I think he was maybe embarrassed for being scared, or didn't want to frighten me anymore. I just didn't want to ask him about it. I was already living in fear thanks to whatever was attacking me at night. I didn't need that fear during the day too. We sort of just agreed without speaking it aloud not to speak about it. Thinking back, I believe this was when we started spending more time walking the road nearby, visiting friends' houses, and going to the pool and so on. My brother is Christian, and he eventually revealed that he truly believed it was the devil messing with him. I'm pagan myself, so the devil probably wasn't to blame in my opinion, but something was definitely messing with us that day. Whatever that something was, it wanted our attention. I'd call BS on my brother and assume he was messing with me, but the look of fear on his face stuck with me even after all these years. The only other time I really remember seeing him look that scared, outside of during our tenure in that vile house, was when he was 15 and shot himself in the leg with a pump BB gun after 50 pumps. Remember when I mentioned the bathroom earlier? Yeah, so the bathroom was probably one of the most terrifying parts of the house. It was actually fairly nice for a cheap rental house. It was quite large, with a double vanity sink that had a huge mirror running the length of the countertop. The toilet was, just a normal toilet. The bathtub though, that was weird. The tub was set into this wooden insert with painted walls above. What was strange was that the wooden insert didn't entirely fit the cubby where the tub was. There was a 3 or 4 inch gap between the cubby and the edge of the wooden insert. It was a bit dusty and damp between, and while I didn't mind, dirt mould grossed me out, so I never looked in there. What was freaky about this bathroom wasn't its odd size compared to other rooms, or even that weird cubby. We found out later why the insert didn't fit. It was the fact that no matter where you were at in the bathroom, it felt like you were being watched. I know pretty much anyone has seen Psycho, or It, or any number of horror movies with bathroom or shower scenes has had some healthy discomfort taking a shower once or twice, or a feeling like you've been watched. This was different. This was oppressive. You couldn't use the toilet, take a bath, wash your hands, or even just pop in to drop your dirty laundry off in the corner without feeling like someone was watching every step. Someone who wanted to harm you. Fast forward a few months. We moved out in September or maybe early October of the same year. I don't recall exactly. I just remember it was really cold yet, so the leaves were turning and falling in a blanket that covered the driveway. Most of our stuff was in the new house, but we had to spend one last night in the evil one. We all four piled our mattresses in the living room area, as our bed frames were at the new house waiting to be put together. I was small enough that I thought it was pretty cool, and to be honest, I was relieved that I wasn't facing that last night in the house alone. I don't really know what prompted it, who started the conversation or anything. Honestly, I don't even remember all the details now, unfortunately. What I do remember is that all 4 of us started spilling our guts collectively about the oppressive nature of the house. My mum had suffered severe nightmares as well, though without the sleep paralysis element I endured. My dad had seen and heard things at various points. My brother and I had both heard things and I felt a presence. In general, we all just felt as if something was there, watching us, hating us, wanting to hurt us somehow. The next day, we finished packing up and left, never to return. It was as my mum was loading the rest of it into the back of my grandpa's truck that our next door neighbours wandered over. They wished us well, of course, and then my mum found out the truth, which she later shared with us. You see, the story goes, some years before we moved into the house, I'd guess a decade or 2 maybe, there had been a murder in the house. Murder wasn't exactly common in that little hick town, but it did happen. 9 times out of 10, it was either a fight gone too far, or some variant of domestic violence. As anybody who lived in a small town before, meth was the drug of choice for those lot. And it was the same. I suppose this murder could have been counted as a domestic, seeing as the man did kill his wife. If he'd beat her to death, stabbed her, shot her in a reflex moment or drunken rage, it probably wouldn't have been noted after a few years had passed. No, this guy, he decided vehicular homicide might be fun for a minute. He ran her over in the driveway. I'm hoping she was dead by then, but nobody will ever know for sure. You see, he didn't just leave it at that. No, this guy had a sick streak. He picked her up and carried her inside and into the bathroom. He put her body in the bathtub and, well, Mum didn't elaborate since I was still fairly young. I know she was mutilated, but I don't know the details. Honestly, I really don't want to. Like I said, I just hope she was dead before he got her up and in that tub. It explains why the tub insert didn't fit the cubby. It was a replacement, and a crappy half one at that. The other problem with small town back in the day is if you know the right people and can grease the right palms, things have a way of getting misplaced. People who ought to go to jail for life or do a jig at the end of a rope have a way of getting off scot-free. The guy claimed he was innocent. Hell, he was so sincere about it, he decided to make a rather ridiculous statement. Quote, "If I killed her, let me die before a year is out," end quote, he said. I guess he killed her, so maybe it was a twisted sort of justice in the end. But I heard he suffered pretty well at the end, mangled in some machine accident at a balloon gene plant. There is one last tidbit about this place I'd like to share before I save and post this mess of a story. Another little bit from the neighbour. Apparently the family that lived there before us didn't stay too long either, maybe 6 or 8 months. That family had a teenage son who had a bit of a reputation as being into some dark stuff. Now, having been accused of this myself a few years later, I tend to take this part of the story with a grain of salt. Supposedly, the kid was into some evil stuff, devil worship, the usual thing. The part that isn't so usual, and definitely isn't keeping with my own views. Apparently, this kid had a knack for making the neighbourhood pets disappear. What was found of them later wasn't altogether pleasant. The belief is that he was using them for dark rituals, trying to summon demons. Maybe he was just your garden variety sociopath. So vengeful spirits, demons, or something else? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe a bit of both, or maybe something else altogether. To be honest, I don't really care anymore. I've seen both the dead and the demonic since then, and maybe it's just because I was such a little kid back then, but that place still scares me more than anything I've faced since. The house is still empty these days, I think. The trees are grown up enough that you can't pinpoint the house on any Google map. All I can see is we drove by the driveway and some trees. Somehow though, even centuries from now when hopefully that house is torn down and the earth salted behind it, I have a feeling that whatever was watching and oppressing us back then is still around. I still don't like bathrooms at night. I haven't had a sleep paralysis episode in a year or two, thankfully.